Okay, let's call this meeting. Today is, May 12th, and I am calling the meeting to order of the Light Board for Concord Municipal Light Plant. We're meeting again on Zoom this morning, and because we are still working under the executive order, Governor Baker's executive order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law that were issued more than a year ago, last March, because of the coronavirus. This meeting is being recorded. For those who are attending, if you have a question, please use the raise hand function. And note that we will not be using the chat or the Q&A function in this meeting. When it's your time to, when you're called upon to speak, please turn on your video so we can see you as well as hear you. It helps us put a name to the face. And if you've dialed in by phone and would like to raise your hand, you can do this by pressing *9. And if you've dialed in and you want to unmute yourself because you're about to talk, you can press *6 and then *6 again to mute again after you've finished speaking. So I first want to say thank you formally to Wendy for chairing last month's meeting while I was away. Thank you. I was away for 3.5 weeks. It was a pretty long time. And I'm still catching up, but I really appreciate you stepping in and doing that. 5:30 in the morning was not my finest time to be attending a town meeting, so I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, so our meeting dates look like we are going to squeeze a meeting in before town meeting, it looks like, on June 9th. Any problem? Does anybody see any problems with the meeting dates? June 9th, July 14th, August 11th, and maybe that's as far as we can go for now because people's schedules change. Are there conflicts coming up, do you see, for July or August, or maybe even September or September 8th?
June's a potential conflict for me. We have an E&E board meeting at the same time. John Zimmerang is the president's seeing if he can move that meeting so that it'll be available. But that's one potential conflict for me. But obviously, this meeting is the priority. So
that's the June 9th meeting.
Yeah.
So that would be the meeting just before town meeting. So we should think about whether we need a meeting before town meeting, and if so, change it to a day that we can make it. Town meeting is on June 13th.
I can make the June 9th meeting. I would just miss the board meeting for E&E. So I think we keep our meeting where it is, and hopefully they'll be able to adjust the time of that meeting, which I think they will.
Okay, but we'll stay in contact, and if something happens, yeah, Brian.
I just want to confirm there was no packet that I missed for this meeting.
No packet.
Okay.
Oh, good. I missed it too, Brian. Well, I feel like I had an excuse to miss things as I'm getting back to normal. All right. So let's take up the director's update. If there's no other news that we need to. Yeah, Pam. I think if you could unmute yourself, that would be great.
Sorry. I guess we're not doing minutes today, but I did want to express, first of all, incredible gratitude to everybody who works on these minutes. They're just incredibly difficult, and it's an important part of our public process.
It's all Karen. She does the bulk of the work, and it's great.
Okay, well, that's fabulous, and I just wanted to appreciate that. I wanted to, though, offer the observation that they are very long, and I think they're long to the point of almost being verbatim, and that creates two problems in my judgment. One is that the public, it doesn't maybe serve the public the best, because the public needs to see, what did we decide? What were the issues? What are the to-dos? That kind of stuff. And maybe pare back a little bit the narrative. The second problem with that is that when you make something almost verbatim, it makes it look like you've captured what people really said. And I don't think that it does that. I mean, it really kind of creates some, in my judgment, some problems. So I would, defer to the group, defer to Stephen Crane and everyone else. But I think that these minutes, especially with the recording that everybody can have, are too long.
Ryan?
Yeah, I understand that concern, and I don't need a transcript, but what I have seen in minutes and past is the summary becomes so high level that you can't hear dissenting opinions. So I want to make sure that we capture both sides of the argument, not just the conclusion, because sometimes there's good points in the dissenting argument. So I don't mind shorter. I just want to make sure that not just the votes are captured, which is, minutes before have been quite short before the videos. And I kind of appreciate the longer one. I know it's a struggle for us to go through it and do corrections and things. And trust me, I thought I could do that in one night with everybody's comments, and it just wasn't going to happen.
Well, I will push back a tiny bit, but again, I defer to everybody. I think that there's a danger of misrepresentation, and I think there's a danger that everything gets lost in the forest. And I think there's probably a happy medium there. But I did want to make the point, I think it's unusual for minutes to be this extensive. My main concern is the proper representation of points of view, et cetera. And we have a transcript. So enough said.
Wait, hold it. Oh,
so I've also, I've had some people ask for those minutes. For FinCom and so forth. And those that haven't watched the recording or haven't been there through it, I've received feedback saying they appreciate the detail. So yes, I agree that it needs to be a happy medium.
Mm-hmm. So Wendy, you have a question or comment?
I guess this is, having done a lot of minutes, I would agree that they should be abbreviated. And, Anita Techley has provided guidance on how to draft minutes. And I think it's worth going back to those because it's much like Pam said, which is highlight the context. And to the point of dissent, we can still represent that, but it doesn't have to be a he said, she said. We just need to represent that issue. So I agree.
And what was that name? Anita
Techley, right. Yeah.
Techley.
She's a former town clerk.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Let me also just say, and this is kind of in a way to a comment I direct towards Karen. If you could take a look, just generally, Karen, if you could just contemplate and reflect on the difference between the final product and what you start out, that initial draft, and try and internalize that a little bit. I know that some of the stylistic changes may evolve over time as the makeup of this board and the specific clerk or changes. But an example would be formal versus informal language. I find the use of the word of a first personal, the I or we, to not be that good in a set of minutes because we're all here. So when you say we are going to do something, it kind of like evades responsibility. You can't really tell who it was that the we refers to. So that's kind of a stylistic thing. And I would support Pam's comment about needing to cut this down because it's taking a long time to review, and we missed it. We've been late for a long time, and missing an opportunity this month is just going to make us later.
So I sent out January, February, and I'm combining the returned edits, and that will go out for a second review. Then the March I've sent out, and I've received from Karen yesterday or the day before, April. I suggest in any of those four that if you want to delete sections that you feel are too long, please put that in your suggestions. We'll give guidance to Karen on what kind of things to cut going forward. Wendy looks like she's got some comments.
No, I just think, as clerk, that's kind of what your role is, to try to take that on as sort of trying to summarize it. So I know and I respect it's an incredible amount of work. So
right.
That's the hard part.
Well, yeah. I tend to like the long minutes, but I will work to cut them back.
I just want to add, now that we've heard from the rest of the board, I think that it's very important to strive to cut them back. A. B, I think it is the clerk's job to try to assimilate the comments, which appear to be basically consensus on cutting back, and to take the lead doing that, or we'll be in an iterative process again. And finally, I just want to reiterate my extreme gratitude to both Brian and Karen. I would like to end by saying, I think that Karen's job may be closer to, getting a lot out in a kind of draft that then, as Wendy suggests, Brian culls for purposes of board of public expression. So I think, of all, Karen, thank you very, very much for erring on the side of over-inclusivity, but I think it then falls to Brian to make it work as a public document that reflects the key issues that we dealt with.
So
I'll work on it.
I just want to acknowledge that this conversation has happened at a lot of board and committee meetings, partially because almost all the meetings now are recorded or videoed and are available online. So the question has come up at a lot of committee meetings about what is the need for minutes if there is a transcript for anyone who wants to read, who want to watch a meeting, can fast forward parts of the conversation, can go back and see them again. So the question has come up at a lot of committee meetings, and it seems like the consensus has been so far that minutes should be high level, key decision points, and allow with a link to the online version for those who want to get the in-depth conversation. Gordon, and then I can move on.
An actual transcript would be really helpful. Also, Brian, thank you for you've often put in notes about what timestamps are. And that's something we've never done before because we haven't actually had the recording available. We've had something that's on a handheld device that nobody actually has access to except the staff member. So we could actually get transcripts while we're using Zoom. That's a technology that's actually for sale, and we could get that. And you'd have a written transcript of the meeting that could just be another attachment that goes on and gets posted with the minutes.
Or we could, I like this conversation is kind of going around. So I'll work to pare it back. I'm going to include the link to the video, and I'm going to, instead of putting the timestamps as a comment, I'll put them next to the starting points of agenda topics. And Dave, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I just, we've had this conversation with the board over the years. It's gone, want all the details, want it short and concise. So it's really a function of what you guys are looking for, as long as we capture what was discussed and the key points if votes are taken. So we can adjust, of course, but we've gone back and forth depending on the direction of the board. So this isn't something that's new. It's another adjustment.
So I think I'm going to just summarize this conversation to say there seems to be more of a consensus around shorter minutes that are succinct and highlight the key decision points of the meeting with reference to the availability of an online recording of the whole meeting for those who want to get more in depth. Did I capture that correctly? I think I see you.
Yes.
Okay, great. I think we're ready to I'm ready to move on to our next agenda. I'm going to be Wendy, and I'm going to get us done on time today. So we're going to move on. Yeah.
You do have someone with their hand raised in the way.
I'm sorry. You're right, David Allen. Sorry, David. Would you like to speak?
Oh, thanks so much. Let's see. Can you hear me? I hope you can.
We can hear you.
Good. Dave points out that boards composed of different people have had actually quite different views on this matter. I'm a voice, a view that actually looks back well over 15 years now, practically every board meeting over that period of time. I think there's a key word in the prior discussion. It's the word misrepresentation. The only misrepresentation is to leave something out. And let's be very clear about those facts. Let's also notice that there will not be recordings of these things that are readily available very shortly, within a few months at the very most. Yes, there'll be the recording that lies on the table and the one that I make when I'm there, but folks aren't going to be going to recordings. You'll have your set of preferences on this. The facts are what matter. If you feel the need to summarize, you can put a summary at the head of the minutes that are created. I'll say again, the only misrepresentation is to leave something out. And we need to be very clear about that and be damn sure that future boards, future public, such as myself, looking back to prior minutes, do have access to detail. I hope you'll keep in mind that there have been different views on this matter, quite different views on this matter over certainly the decade and a half plus that I have been here. My own personal view is that accuracy is everything. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. I think we can move on to the director's update.
Okay. So there were 490 EV registered in Concord at the end of 2020, which was an increase in 98 new EV registered to Concord's residents. We've received 35 requests for EV special support in the first quarter of 2021. It's almost 2.5 times as many as the first quarter of 2020. We now have 16 air source heat pump installers on the Concord Clean Comfort participating contractor list, and more in the application queue. 27 CMLP customers have already received air source heat pump rebates in 21. And we have 20 more active projects that should be installed over the next few months. Combine that, already 80% of our peak of 59 heat pumps rebates distributed in 2018. So that's going well. The total number of coaching requests we've received since Concord Clean Comfort program began on February 23rd has increased 36% in the last month alone. So we're getting some good participation there as well. You may recall that approximately 1 year ago, we had a failure on a tap changer on one of the transformers at station 219. We had the device repaired and put the transformer back into operation. Recently, Eversource requested to take one of the transmission lines out. It's actually the transmission line that feeds this transformer. They had some maintenance to do. So we had our maintenance contractor in to inspect the tap changer to see if everything is operating properly. We found some arcing in there again, which is not good. So our maintenance contractor, working with the tap changer manufacturer, ran some tests and found that there's an internal wiring issue in the transformer. It's a pretty big deal. So, you know, we're going to work with the manufacturer. You know, this is something that needs to be corrected. It's a pretty big project. So you'll be hearing from me on this over the coming months. You know, this has been this way since it was built. So it's definitely a manufacturing issue. And I'll keep you guys informed. You may recall in the 2021 budget, we had a new bucket truck in there. That bucket truck for broadband is now in service. We went with a truck opposed to a van. Gives us a little more versatility. We can tow wire trailers and whatnot. And it has a little bit more reach, which is what we needed. So that's going to help with increasing installations, having the third unit on board. I mentioned at the last meeting that we were doing a recruitment for a customer service rep. We had 156 applicants, which was a lot. We got those in 5 days, I think it was. We screened the applicants. We completed first round interviews. We ended up interviewing 12 people. We have second round interviews scheduled for tomorrow and Friday. So that's moving on quite nicely. On May 3rd, we executed phase 3 of a restaffing plan. So now essential service employees are in the office 5 days a week. And phase 4 of that staffing plan is scheduled for June 7th, and that will return the non-essential services employees to the office. So far, the plan is being executed. It's working well, and we're looking forward to the next step. The last thing, I'd mentioned last meeting, and I think it was kind of requested about having Energy New England in for an update and kind of a little bit of history. I'm working on scheduling that. Most likely it won't be until the July meeting. As I mentioned, June meeting is currently conflicting with our board meeting. So that's going to be the target. And I'll let the board know when we have that ready to go. That's my update.
Great. Any questions for Dave? Brian? You're
yeah. So the broadband installs, I know we paused. We're going to talk about the article coming up, but I want to know generally the rate of installations. Are we back to pre-pandemic rate of installations, and the bucket truck will go beyond that and we'll speed up?
Yeah, so installations we had paused, right, during the pandemic, other than, if it's someone in the healthcare industry that needed remote work, educators, and if someone moved into town because it was deemed essential broadband. So we were working on those installs, but the backlog list was paused. Greg has gone through that list. It's come up with a plan. It's a pretty good plan. And we've started installations as of a week ago Monday. So that's started. So we're trying to get through that backlog. It's quite a few. We're communicating with the customers as we have been throughout the pandemic. So I guess the response is this third vehicle is going to help significantly with that, catching up. And there's over 240 people on that list. So, in a given year, we generally would previously would install about 300 new customers. We're looking at, we're in May, so we've lost a few months already. So we got to get that backlog caught up. And we've worked on a plan to increase the installation rate from 300 a year to about 450. So hopefully that plan will work. But the primary focus right now is getting the backlog taken care of.
Great. My other question was really a comment. You had mentioned electric vehicle adoption and some of those other numbers. I know that Kate put out the update for the 2020 climate plan, and that has a lot of those numbers in there. So if people want to look, they can go to the town website for sustainability reports, and you'll find an update that gives us all those values for our work. It's great.
Yep.
So Dave, I have one question. I can't remember if it was at a select board meeting or maybe at the select board hearing. One of the members had asked the question about what CMLP was doing to make sure there was an adequate electrical supply to feed all of the EVs coming online. I think you said we have close to 490 or something EVs. At what point do you have to start thinking about a phased charging at 11 o'clock?
So, obviously we're pushing for people to charge off peak. It makes more sense financially. If they charge during peak, we don't collect enough money to cover what it actually costs to charge. So we're really pushing for that off peak charging through our programs. In terms of the grid, it goes with not just electric vehicles, but programs going all electric. We currently have plenty of capacity on hand, but we have to keep an eye on the grid as things progress, because if we don't, and we get, a big slew of, full all electric houses and whatnot, we don't have the capacity to handle that, then, we're not doing our job. So it's something that we constantly look at. We have a contract with Eversource for 60 megawatts. Our peak right now in the summer is about 35. So we have room for growth for right now. So no issue there, but we have to keep an eye on that, because as people upgrade heat pumps, EVs, all electric homes, that's going to add load. And, our staff is going to need to keep an eye on it and do some analysis so that we're not up against that capacity peak. Now, when we talk about the capacity peak, we also talk about what can the substation handle. The substation can handle 70 megawatts. We have contracted for 60. So there's room for growth. But when we get to that 60, when we get close to that 60, Stephen and I will end up meeting with Eversource and having a discussion for a negotiation on additional capacity. Now, when you do that, that's when it can be expensive because there's so much capacity from Eversource available. So if they have to upgrade, then that cost ends up getting pushed onto the company or department looking for additional capacity. So the short answer is we're good right now, but we need to actively keep an eye on it.
Can I assume that once we have smart meters, that data management will be made a lot easier for us because we'll be seeing the data flowing in from actual time of use for electrical requirement?
Yes, that's one of the benefits that will help us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to build on that, I had emailed Alice and Dave about asking for staff to put together some kind of statement of ability. It's a kind of a we got the statement on electrification because there has been some concerns that have been raised about Concord Light's ability to grow with an increased electrical demand, and it would be good for Dave to put those comments down with your staff in some kind of formal manner to say, we can do this. We level load is of value, and if we need to get more, we can do that. But we're this far from those critical points.
Yeah, I think the key piece there is being careful how you say, if we need more, we can get more, because we are at the mercy of Eversource at that point.
Yep. Right.
And if they have to build a transmission system, you're not talking about, $1 million. You're talking about, tens of millions of dollars. So that's why I said we got to keep a close eye on it and approach it. It's not as simple as we got this. We have capacity now, but in the future, it would be a negotiation, and there's an unknown there.
Yeah, it would be great to have those have an understanding in the public sphere about your ability to meet fully electric buildings and fully electric vehicles, how you can, what your limitations are, so that we go from the assumptions in the discussions at these meetings to Concord Light has said they can meet these attributes. That'd be great.
And I'd also like to just keep in mind that in-town solar can be part of the equation too. And we hear a lot about how we're getting into a dangerous territory with having too much solar, the solar saturation and so forth. But let's also hear that it can be part of the solution too. So anyway, thanks.
So is energy efficiency. So maintaining our programs that encourage people to weatherize their homes and make them more efficient so they use less energy is always the highest priority and the least cost kilowatt hour, as we know.
Yeah, I just want to point out that, solar is intermittent, so it's not a firm supply, and that can be problematic, if we're in a high load area and we're counting on it and a cloud goes through. Come from the grid. So
why we need batteries, right? That's why we need batteries, right?
That's why we need a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, while we're talking, we seem to be having shifted now into the conversation of power supply. I think it's time to take up the next agenda item, which is on our power supply opportunities. And there are two on the table for us to discuss this morning.
Yeah, so Laura's going to take care of one. I'm going to take care of the other. I'll let her go first. She's going to talk about an offering from the New York Power Authority. So go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Can I share my screen? Is that possible?
Yes.
Okay, I put together something that I hope won't be too awful to look at. Can everybody see an Excel sheet?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me try to make it a little bit bigger. Bear with me a second. Is that a little better?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. So CMLP has an existing contract for power that's produced by the New York Power Authority, which is hydropower coming from the state of New York. And the way it works is we pay for both capacity and energy from the hydro facility, and we pay the New York ISO transmission to wheel it across the state of New York and deliver it to Massachusetts. The NYPA organization has been encouraged, or maybe required, I'm not sure the exact legal basis, to offer more of this power to the state of Massachusetts. So right now, CMLP is entitled to a little over 2% of the output of this facility. I'm sorry, not 2% of the facility, 2% of the Massachusetts share of the facility. And that equates to about 9,000 megawatt hours per year of our roughly 170,000 megawatt hour supply. And we're being offered the opportunity to purchase more of the hydropower. The power qualifies under the Massachusetts greenhouse gas reduction rules as non-emitting power. However, it does not have any RECs associated with it. So, you know, if you purchase power from here, technically it's not carbon emitting, but by buying it, you're not adding new renewable energy to the New England grid. So what's on this sheet is the, believe it or not, simplified version of the analysis that MWEC, who's the administrator of this power supply contract to the state of Massachusetts. MWEC is an organization similar to E&E, and represents a lot of municipal utilities, a lot of them in Western Mass, but not exclusively. Anyway, what this shows, and I'm not going to go through every number, so don't worry, but the contract consists of a number of elements of cost. One is the capacity cost, one's the energy cost, and then down here, you're not paying for it, but it's the environmental attribute value. So this is for the entire state of Massachusetts, not just CMLP share, okay? So the nameplate capacity of the facility, here's what we believe the capacity is going to cost us in dollars per kilowatt month. Here's what the payment would be per month. And then here's what the value is. You'll notice in these first 5 years, there's a blank here for the value. This is the value of the capacity. And that's because if we started taking this power, which they're proposing to begin in 2021, we would pay this money out for the capacity, but we would not get any value from it whatsoever because the capacity could not participate in the New England ISO capacity market. That market's already been settled and gone, and we wouldn't enjoy any value. So this is the huge negative of this contract. If it didn't have this flaw, it would kind of be a no-brainer that it would be a good value, and I'll explain why in a minute. So that's the capacity. Here's where the capacity starts being worth something in the future years. And here is the profitability. So this is what it's worth minus what you're going to pay for it. So if it's worth $833,000 in 2026 and you're going to pay $2.3 million, that's a negative outflow of cash of $1.5 million. So you can see these negative outflows of cash are pretty significant in the early years, and then they decrease. But it's always negative, and that's because what we're paying for the capacity is higher than what the forecasted value of capacity is going to be. Keep in mind, these are not static numbers. This is somebody's view of what the capacity will be worth. I believe this is IH Insight, which is a private data analysis and research firm, what they think the capacity is going to be worth. They run models, you know, they incorporate their forecast of how much offshore wind is going to be coming into the market, and they cross supply with demand, and here's the number that comes out. But, you know, the capacity could be worth more or less. So this is just a point forecast, but currently it's estimated that the capacity part of this contract would be upside down for the state of Massachusetts by about $15 million. Contrast that with the energy portion. This is how much energy is going to come out of the contract. Here's what we're going to pay for it. There's the cost. Here's what we'll pay for transmission. And again, this is a forecast, but this is the estimate. Here's what the energy we pay for it. Here's what it would be worth. So we're paying out $700,000 and it's worth $2.2 million. So here's the cash flow on this, and you can see that's very positive. And so over the life of this thing, the cash flow on the energy is 17 million, the negative is 15.6, and MWEC's view of the environmental attribute value is pretty modest at about $500,000. So if you work all this out, the cash flows work out to be 1.5 million to the good. You can see that there's an NPV that needs to be done because the early years, it's not a good deal. And the later years, it gets to be a decent deal. MWEC ran the NPV at a 5% discount to come up with a total positive NPV of 463,000. If you were to drop this to something closer to 2 to 3%, which is probably our borrowing rate, you know, the cash flow gets to be better. So if we have 10,000 megawatt hours of NIPA power now. We have the opportunity to add more. And if we did, it looks like it would be financially over the life of the contract, not a bad value, assuming, you know, all these forecasts prove to be close to accurate. It is non-carbon emitting. It doesn't add new renewable to the region, but the energy part of this in particular is a very good value. And the capacity is really the piece that is making it not be a no-brainer. So that's the summary, and you know, we're open for discussion. I don't know, Dave, you want to go through your opportunity before we open discussion, or if you want to do that now. You're on mute.
I think we should handle them one at a time. They're two different also.
So I'll leave this open in case people have questions about this.
So let me ask the first question, and of course it's a bit of a naive one. When we are measuring our renewable supply in our portfolio, while it is a renewable energy, it is non-additive. What does that do to our total renewable supply pie in total if we were to take this opportunity? Do we get to count this as part of our renewable supply even though it's non-additive to our supply?
So from the perspective of the state and the requirement, the new MLP requirements, it will count. But if I were speaking to a certain group in Concord that has said, you know, hey, I don't consider this to be renewable, I tend to show the NIPA power as a separate line item so that it can be added or subtracted depending on whom I'm speaking to, because there are different opinions about how it should be counted. So we just want to be transparent about those volumes and let the people who are listening to the numbers interpret that how they want to.
So there is a board policy that says our first, in terms of how we want to provide for 100% renewable power in Concord, is our first priority would be new projects that are additive to the Massachusetts supply. This is, and then the second would be a renewable source that is non-additive but takes the value of already produced or producing energy. So the question before the board is, which of those two do you feel trumps our decision on whether to move forward on the NIPA opportunity? I think there's a cost analysis here that looks like it can be compelling over the long term of the contract, although the first 5 years, it's a considerable loss. Are there thoughts in the board? I see Brian and Gordon. Let's start with Brian, then we'll go to Gordon.
So I view this, you know, we want to do in-town renewable production first. Dispatchable would be even better, but that's a very high cost. This is equivalent to the nuclear contracts that we have for comparison's sake. Something that doesn't emit greenhouse gases, supports an older facility, so it's not additive to new efforts, but it is hydro, which avoids some of the concerns about nuclear and its byproducts, which we don't have a direct policy on. So the capacity value seems to not be there, but the generation value is there. The $1 million, what's the end of the last year of the agreement?
Yeah, let me do this.
2023?
No, 2032.
Or 2032, sorry. You know, with such a small net financial benefit over time, it's not of harm to our existing portfolio. If you average it over all those years, it is of harm in the beginning and of value at the end. So I like this contract because it provides dispatchable electricity and it does not increase expense over the life of the contract. I wish that the capacity value was better because those are some pretty strong losses on capacity. And there's no way to divide the contract and say, we'll take the energy, but not the capacity. Okay.
No, afraid not. Good idea, but.
Well, yeah, I'm sure everyone would want to do it.
Yeah.
Those are my comments. Thank you.
Gordon, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for this. I think this looks like a good opportunity. I have one question for you, Laura. And you know, look, I'm not an expert on environmental anything, though the weather person that I watch on the TV has been warning the viewers lately that New England is in a not so much a drought, but a dry spell. There wasn't enough winter snowpack. It's just gotten me thinking about water as an issue in itself, which could be something that, you know, society, I don't know about the Concord Light Board, but society needs to think about with respect to hydro projects generally. So here's my question to you, Laura. The sense I'm getting from your presentation is that this isn't really additive. It doesn't actually increase, doesn't represent an increase on the part of NYPA in the amount of water that is being controlled, right? So it's not like as if we're having any kind of negative or adverse impact on the water ecology by making this choice. Is that right?
My understanding is that basically what we're moving is entitlement rights from one particular group to another. So I think the write-up said, and don't hold me to this, but I think it was something like the certain industrial and commercial customers didn't need as much of this power anymore. And so NYPA was going to be required to offer it to the states, to the other states. So it's just shifting entitlement rights from one group to another.
Yeah. So I think that I'm good with it.
Okay, Wendy?
Yeah, so I just want to comment on a word that you said, Alice, that we had a policy on the mass renewable first. And so I certainly agree with what you said. I don't know for the citizens who might be listening that we have a policy. So if we do, we should share it. And I think it's probably a good thing for us to think about. In the long term, our aim is to get full renewable power supply, right? So I know we have a lot of discussion around RECs, and that's one way in which we can measure it. But I'm in support of it, but I just wanted to caution us around what we're saying we have a policy around, a written documented policy. And I think this is still a good opportunity for us to pursue because, you know, having renewable sources is going to be the challenge as the pressure on regulations comes and increases.
Thank you. Pam.
I just want to pick up on Gordon's point, and it's a more generic point for us to think about going forward with respect to the indirect, shall we say, cost to the environment. I think that is an issue we should always ask with respect to anything that we're purchasing. So just hypothetically, on this one, I have no idea what the costs are, but an analysis we might do for hydro, let's say, is what is the actual source and what are the environmental impacts of that source? And certainly I know, just in my experience as an environmental lawyer, that dams are very impactful on water bodies, if not managed properly. And even if managed properly, they're hot before you go over the dam, they're cold after. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. So Gordon's point made me just want to remind us that when we're analyzing sources and distribution and transmission and everything, I think there is a legitimate question that always should be asked about, well, what are the unintended environmental consequences that we may be incurring here? So I just want to thank Gordon for the observation and just observe that I think that's a really good analytic point for us always to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Are there other comments from the board on this, or this requires a vote of the board if whichever direction we take on this one? Are we ready for vote?
One quick question.
Yeah.
It says in the agenda that there were 2 hydro. Is it the capacity and generation are the 2, or is there another one to talk about?
No, I have another one to talk about.
Should we talk about that one before we vote, Alice?
Okay.
Yeah. I'm asking what makes sense. I'm not suggesting one way or the other.
Sure, we can talk about the other one. I think that these are 2 opportunities. They would both require a vote.
Yes.
And we may choose to vote for both or vote for neither. And the same questions will be raised about the environmental impacts of a project. All right, so sounds like we should move on to the second project and then we'll vote on each one separately.
All right. So I'm gonna take the second one on. So this is also a hydro project. It's an existing hydro. It's a run of the river system up in Concord, New Hampshire. The products it comes with would be energy. It has an annual average energy production of 45,000 megawatt hours. Capacity, 100% of the capacity from the facilities is measured in kilowatt hours. The present ISO New England winter capacity of these, it's 3 facilities actually, is 7.9 megawatts. And the summer capacity is just about 2.6 megawatts. It comes with environmental attributes, Massachusetts Class 2 renewable energy certificates. And we're talking, in the range of $56 per megawatt hour. The contract would be a 10-year contract from when it's executed. In this particular case, there's a couple pieces. Again, the Class 2 RECs, that's something the board would want to discuss. I know Class 1 is the preference. We haven't run the analysis, hence why we don't have a spreadsheet like Laura just had on this. The last hydro project that Laura was just talking about, we did have Energy New England go through and take a look at it. We probably should have them do the same with this, but again, little direction from the board on how we want to proceed. But again, it's another renewable energy contract, and we look at each one when they come out and do an evaluation. So I don't have as much detail right now as Laura does, but I did want to get it to the board so we could start the discussion on this one and kind of go from there.
All right, so we're not choosing between the 2, and it sounds like we may not even be able to take a vote today on the second one. Are we interested in the capacity or the supply from 2 projects at this point? Is that what we currently have on the docket, that we want to buy an increased supply right now from hydro? Laura, maybe you're best to answer that. Or are these opportunities that presented themselves at a time that for us to be able to discuss them?
Yeah, so these were, I think if I understand your question, these are a little bit more reactive in that these opportunities appeared. And so we're being asked to weigh in on this. On the NIPA, you know, basically, I think I mentioned we're taking about 10,000 a year on that contract now. And I believe, if I understand the allocation properly, the incremental piece, the supplemental piece that we're being offered would be about half that amount, about 4,500 a year. There may be an opportunity to take even more because if other MLPs don't want the supplemental power, then what would have gone to them then becomes available to everybody else, so we can up our entitlement share. So there may be a possibility to, they take as much as, you know, to double our quantity, to go from 9,000 a year to 18,000 a year. So I think at a minimum, we may not need you to vote today because the contract is not in final form, but it would be really helpful for negotiating and planning purposes to know how much, well, number one, if you want to take it, and then number two, how much you would want to take if the opportunity presents itself to increase our entitlement share.
Okay.
And just to be clear, what you guys vote on is a recommendation for the town manager to execute because he's the signing authority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Gordon has his hand up. And then
I just want to ask my colleagues on the board, how do you all feel about class 2, about non-additive, and as opposed to just the core environmental advantage here, which is that this is an opportunity to increase our non-emitting power at a reasonable price. And so, I mean, I'm not as tied to the rec thing, I think, as others in town are. And, you know, that we got the Energy Futures Task Force recommendation that really wanted us to focus on class 1, New England and Massachusetts regional recs. So we've kind of been, but they also didn't forbid us from, say, doing nuclear or anything like that. They really actually put it back on us, as we are the ones that actually have this job. And so anyway, I still kind of lean towards this, but I just want the board to think about this, because if there's anything I think key about what we're recommending to Dave and Steve to do, it's to be clear in our minds what our opinion is on that exact question.
So I think that's a really good point, Gordon. I want to I'll get to you in a second, Brian. But Wendy's point earlier, I was under the assumption that we had an operating policy of the board that set a priority for how we would pursue new energy supply. And maybe that's not the case. And we have an operating principle, but not a policy. And this calls to me a question of whether we should work on developing the policy, so that other boards will, going forward, will have something, a construct around which to make decisions for renewable supply. Is that right, Wendy? We do not have a policy. My recollection was that we have one, but I'm going to go with your.
I think that's where I'm going. I think we sort of have inherent preferences, and we've not even documented those. I think we've all been just acting upon them. So
yeah.
So if I could, we do have a renewable energy strategy and a solar strategy that were done back in 2010, I believe, and 11.
Yep.
Probably need to be updated. So there is kind of a guiding principle out there.
Yep. But I guess to the point of, will we take class 2 or not? It's so, I think we always want class 1 over class 2, and we've taken class 2 credits, so that as a board, we haven't said no. I think we have just a track record of supporting it. So,
yeah.
So I wanted to mention that Dave and Laura attended a climate action advisory board meeting back in mid-December, where they did a wonderful job explaining all of this with the climate board and getting their feedback. And my understanding of that discussion was that, you know, we'd all love to see solar and storage in town that meets all of our demands and is dispatchable. But that comes with a massive price tag we just simply can't afford. But we want to get there. And then there's different levels of what we desire. One of those levels expressed was bundling the environmental attributes of the purchased power together. So currently there are some wind contracts where they qualify for main class 2 RECs, and we retire those because we're buying both the attribute and the generation. I see that this is similar. We're buying both the generation and the attribute, so we're retiring the class 2. The point about class 1 is that if we're going to buy them unbundled, we should only be buying mass class 1, because the additive effort that we're trying to do in the region is got to be focused on that one area, which allows for new renewable generation to be built in the region. So I agree, we do need to kind of write all that down and go through that video is a good summary. But my question that I actually started with was, Laura, back in that meeting and for that, you kind of did a nice graph of our existing contracts over time and how much of our portfolio is already spoken for in the future. Is agreeing to both of these contracts or one of these contracts going to make a substantial over purchase? I don't think so, but I wanted to ask that question. And that's it.
So I think, again, if I could share my screen, that would be good.
You should be able to.
Okay, this is that complicated chart. Can you see this okay?
Yep.
Okay. I want to make it bigger, but I'm not able to do that at the moment. So anyway, what this shows is class 1, class 2 nuclear, and then everything else. And then the overlay is how many Massachusetts class 1 only RECs, because we've never bought unbundled or non-associated class 2. We've only bought unbundled, non-associated Massachusetts class 1 RECs. And how this changes over time. You can see the nuclear growing as a percentage of the portfolio. This is a percentage of our supply needs. So in 2022, when the nuclear ramps up to 21%, you can see that we still are purchasing 31% from emitting sources. And emitting here includes NIPA, it includes the solar projects in town. It's anything that doesn't have a certificate with it, okay? And then here's the overlay of the anticipated number of RECs we would be able to buy with the amount that's currently being collected in rates. And so this, like the NIPA is going to be 2021 to 2032. There's still plenty of room in the portfolio to add additional NIPA. It's going to show up in this 10% in the gray bar here because it doesn't have, you know, a certificate with it.
What is it? The blue or the green bar is the main class 2 with wind, and
yes, no, not with wind. That's hydro, Brian.
That's it's hydro. Right. Okay, so it would expand the green bar, correct?
No, because NIPA doesn't technically come with any certificates. The certificates are not produced from that facility.
The one that I was talking about would, Brian, would
yeah.
Well, the one you were talking about, but not the NIPA project that Laura was talking about.
The correct one.
So one comes with RECs and one does not.
Yeah. With the either, well, what is the percentage of our portfolio that one or both of these contracts would add?
So if the NIPA contract, it would add about 4.5% as currently envisioned, but that might be able to be increased if other MLPs don't want all of their supplemental offer.
Okay, and the Concord, New Hampshire contract would add about what percentage?
I haven't done that percentage yet.
Okay.
Brian, I just misspoke. I'm sorry. It's not 4.5%. It's 4,500 megawatt hours. And so that is
about 1 or 2%.
Yeah, 2.6%.
Okay, so that's
they're both about the same.
All right, so this is not something like the nuclear contracts that's going to add a massive 36%.
No.
All right, so we don't have a concern of over contracting with these contracts. The other question this graph brings up is, did you execute on the expanded nuclear contracts? Is that a definitive in this?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we have over, if we were to do these hydros, we've already got 60% committed for 2025. Maybe even 70% committed for 2025.
Of renewables. Or not, excuse me, non-emitting.
Committed contracts.
Well, we actually have up to 70% because we have this 10% here, which includes NIPA.
Yeah.
Not the incremental NIPA, the existing NIPA.
But the point is that we're not overcommitted.
Correct.
We may be a bit long, but we haven't overbought.
Yeah.
What this does show, because this goes over 100%, is that if all this comes to happen and prices remain where they are or go lower, we may be able to lower the amount collected in rates for renewable to purchase non-associated RECs, because we only need 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Blue bar shows, the amount that's collected in rates that could be used to purchase RECs.
My only concern is that the nuclear, the hydro contracts, the main wind are not additive to the state's RPS. They're not.
The main wind is this green stuff. The blue stuff is.
The blue stuff is right.
The blue stuff is additive.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
The blue stuff and the individual REC only purchases are both additive to the state's RPS. And that's, so we now have we're approaching 50% committed that is not additive. And I like the hydro contracts, but we really want to get more additive contracts, ones that come with class ones as a bundle. Would be great.
Just remember, they're expensive.
Yeah, I know it's all about managing cost as well, but I want us to not just support existing facilities. I want Concord to be additive and getting new generation online. That's what I hear from the community, and that's what I hope to represent. I think this is great. Thank you for sharing the graph. It's helpful.
I agree with you, Brian. We are, we understand class one is the preferred. I think there's a little bit of a balance because we are trying to decarbonize the power supply. And, like some of these contracts, they're not long-term, they're, 10 years. So it could fill a gap.
Yeah.
We're looking, so just something to keep in mind.
And look how much better we're doing than 2016 and 17. And that was even worse, and 5 years before that. So
yeah.
Yep.
I want to make sure I understand the NIPA contract is goes to 2032 and the graph goes to 2030. Is that right? We just haven't projected out.
Correct, because this chart I just pulled up, Alice. I didn't make this chart as a supporting document to the supplemental NIPA peaking power offer. And then that supplemental power is not represented anywhere on this chart. We're just using this chart to say, look, this is the stuff that's already committed.
Yep. I just want to make sure that we understood that we're talking about a contract that goes to 2032. It's just not represented.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion out of this? What I'm hearing though is that we should review the renewable supply strategy that Dave mentioned, that we should look into developing a board policy or a statement of purchase goals so that we have something that is a true working document that actually states all the things that Brian was just committing the board to, and have a robust discussion about that in an upcoming meeting. And that we do not have to make a decision today to purchase either of these two contracts. Am I hearing that the board would like to have a comparative analysis of the two opportunities? We just don't have the data yet on the second one. Is that to be able to make a decision between whether it's one or the other or both?
I think that we could give a general vote on our sentiment about hydro and these contracts. I think I'd be prepared now. Because it's ultimately Dave and the town manager's responsibility. So they can ignore our vote, but I think they will take it into consideration.
I think the town manager has would like to offer something on this. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I have been listening intently, but I was eating a scone, so I had my video off. So I think this conversation, like the conversation about the nuclear contracts, is so illustrative and educational for me. And I think, I'll be candid. The thing that keeps circling in my mind in listening to this discussion is that aphorism, "Don't let the great be the enemy of the good." And how does that get defined by all of you? Because the reality is, your recommendation, which usually comes after a pretty thoughtful and exhaustive debate that pushes the meetings past their scheduled stop time. Really, I have no doubt then, once I receive a recommendation from the board, that autographing the contract is the right thing to do. And that gives me great confidence in knowing that we're meeting the needs of the light plant and addressing the priorities of the community. So I do very much appreciate this discussion, but I mean, I do think that, I do think the board does a good job of balancing, pragmatic considerations, which I think nuclear contracts are an example of. And when I look at the hydro, environmental impacts on hydro plants has been discussed, for decades, and they are there. But is there a generation of electricity that doesn't have some kind of environmental impact? If there is, I've never heard of it. And so I think that's really, and I'm really what I'm really doing is saying thank you for balancing all these things and coming to decisions that do balance, that don't let the great become the enemy of the good. And so I just wanted to thank you for going through all this in great detail and identifying, what should be prioritized in certain circumstances. And that's why, Mike, when I heard the discussion about having a policy, even in the brief time that I've been associated with the light plant, the variability of factors to consider and the changing nature of generation, regulation, consumption, all of that stuff. I'm like, if you wrote a policy, it would be, it would be out of time before the ink was even dry. And so I think a strategy, like Dave said, maybe updating the strategy is the way to go. But the truth is, it's going to be a contract by contract decision. And so maybe just the thing about strategy is, here's the things we should be looking at, not necessarily here are the things we want to accomplish. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. So let's bring this back to where we are now. Thank you for that. Do we want to take a vote on whether we would support the purchase of the NIPA hydro project today to recommend it to Dave and to Stephen Crane?
Alice, prior to doing that, you do have an attendee with a hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for watching that. Terry Ackerman.
Go ahead.
Yes, hi, this is Terry Ackerman. I'm a member of the select board, but I'm just speaking as an individual. I just want to comment briefly that I love Laura's graph. Every time I see it, I learn more. And I want to ask if that gray bar, the non-emitting, could possibly be split in the future. I didn't realize, even though it is emitting, that it includes things like hydro. because they're non-emitting, but they don't have RECs, if I'm understanding correctly. So now I'm thinking I was reading the whole graph wrong, because I was thinking the gray bar was only gas and oil and coal or whatever. So it would be great to know in the future if that gray bar was split between the real emitting and the non-emitting without RECs. Thanks.
Thank you. I think, Laura, you understand the question, right?
Yeah, and I can definitely change the graph. This graph was prepared in particular for an audience that was very strict, Terry, about what could be classified as non-carbon emitting and not. And without the RECs, you know, they insisted that it had to go in the emitting category. But I think you're right. Letting each individual interpret the data as they want to would be helpful. And therefore, rather than categorizing it, it'll make the graph a little more complicated because we'll have a few more different colors of different resources. But that way, it'll be easier for you to see exactly what things are. So I can make that change for you.
Great, thank you.
And can I just comment? If you have that, I love that graph too. And so if you can maintain that graph, and then if there are different viewpoints that we should be cognizant of, it would be helpful to sort of like define those below it, or say, you know, from this audience defines it this way, and it would just help us to be grounded in those facts.
We might want to put it on our website.
Yeah, yeah, that would be great.
That's actually a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good suggestion. Yes, Pam.
If you, and I'm a newcomer, so ignore me, but if you're asking whether we can vote on this now, if we don't need to vote on it now, I would recommend we not vote on it now, just because I would like to be better grounded in some of this. But if you need to vote on it, that's not a problem for me.
I think we heard that we don't have to vote on it today. My question for you is, what do you need to become more grounded to be able to vote in a month from now?
I don't want to waste time on that. I'm
just wondering how, if something has to happen between now and June 9th.
Then just do it. Just do it. Do it.
I mean, I understand wanting to be cautious about when to take a vote, but I have to understand what you need between that.
That's good. I was just asking the question whether it was completely, you know, you were indifferent to the time. That's all. No problem. No problem.
Other thoughts?
Well, I mean, for one thing, I mean, if we really hated it, then you guys could save some time by not pursuing it. So, I mean, we're offering some value here by at least stepping towards this.
Yeah.
And in my case, anyway.
So what I'm hearing is that I'd like, at least from Gordon and from Brian, if you'd like to present a motion for the discussion and for a vote, and we'll see if we're ready to take a vote on it.
By the way, you got me on it too. I'm fine. I just want to know whether we have.
Let's have a motion.
Yeah, please, absolutely.
So Alice, could we have two motions, one for each? Because the second one, I still need to run it through E&E and get there.
And I'm not ready to talk about the second one. You need to do your work before we have any kind of discussion.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. So we're taking a vote on one project, and that's the NIPE project. Yes, Brian.
So just a quick clarification in my notes. Dave, you'd said the New Hampshire contract was $56 a megawatt hour. Is that capacity included? Is the Concord, New Hampshire contract offering capacity or just generation?
No, it's capacity too. I think it's at the clearing price. And that's some of the stuff I want Energy New England to go through and summarize for us so that we have a good understanding of how it's going to be applied to our power supply, the costs, all of that.
Okay, I'll go ahead and Alice, I'll make the motion. I move that the Light Board votes in favor of supporting the NIPA hydro contract that was offered with discretion for the staff to make the final decision.
Do I have a second?
I second that.
Wendy seconds. And now I'll take a roll call vote. I'll go around my screen to make sure I've got everybody. Gordon.
In favor.
Pam.
Yes, and in fact, it was only number 2 that I was I didn't know enough about. So thank you. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, Wendy?
Yep.
And Brian?
Yep.
And Alice, yes. So unanimous vote of the board for you to pursue the opportunities to purchase the NIPA at the quantities and level that you think are appropriate for the supply. Great, thank you. We are behind schedule yet again. Wendy, I'm going to make you chair from now on.
Oh, it's good
You're
discussion.
much better. All right. The next item on our agenda is a discussion of a 100% renewable option. Who's presenting on this discussion? This is about whether we should be offering citizens or residents an opportunity to purchase 100% renewable energy to speed up their particular contributions to our power supply. Who would like to discuss? Who would like to present this?
So I think Laura's going to present this.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
Sure. So I was approached recently by 2 different citizens who requested that they be able to purchase 100% of the power that they receive from the light plant as non-carbon emitting. And I've had informal requests in the past, just asking if CMLP did have this type of product to offer. As we know, CMLP is currently somewhere around 50% non-carbon emitting in its power supply. That comes from a combination of power purchased with certificates and then the purchase of non-associated certificates. So these citizens want to be able to purchase the other 50% that they're getting from the light plant that's not carbon emitting. That's not non-carbon emitting, sorry. And to understanding that they would need to pay a little bit of extra money in order to do that. So I believe both citizens who requested this option are in attendance today, and perhaps the board would like to hear a little bit more from them directly about their desires and why they want to do this.
Okay. Would one of you like to begin the conversation? So one of the participants, I think it is Dan Gainsborough and John Dalton. Is that right? Are either of you available or interested in presenting your interest here? I don't see a hand raised or a request to speak. I think that's the case. So either, I think we're on our own. Oh wait, Dan. Thank you, Dan. Former Light Board member.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Good morning. I'm actually not in the position to speak in great depth about it. I was hoping John would. I don't know if he's here and having technical difficulties, but I can tell you this much. Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. And it's great to see. It's quite an impressive collection of people. And with Laura's and Dave's presentation, I remember just how much I miss and how much I don't miss being on the board in terms of the level of detail. John approached me a while back with this idea, and I thought it sounded great, and I couldn't see any reason why we shouldn't at least try to bring it to the board and for your consideration. And so, as I said, I'm not in a position to speak in great detail about it, but it seems to me that there's a pretty healthy cross-section of folks in Concord that might be willing to do this. And if it helped advance and expedite our path towards 100% renewable, then, does it make sense to at least offer folks that opportunity? And we did meet with Laura and discussed it a little bit, and she gave us some sense of the challenges and opportunities. So.
Okay, thank you. Laura, I guess we don't have a decision to make today. I think maybe this is the first part of the conversation, is to say there seems to be an interest in town for some folks to be able to buy into the purchase of all renewable energy at a quicker pace than the light plant is currently working towards, which is a goal of 2030. And I think I saw something that thought that we would be at our goal before 2030. So there would be a lot of work for us to consider before this could be made possible, I assume, in figuring out, do we buy certain kinds of RECs for that supply, or whether individuals are offered the opportunity to buy RECs on their own. And is that the correct analysis or thinking around this? Those are the options to consider.
So first of all, I apologize if there's background noise here. There's some construction, demolition happening. But there are other MLPs that currently offer this type of a product, such as Middleborough. I have spoken with them a bit about their offering and how they manage the program. And it is pretty simple. It's basically just figuring out through bills how much kilowatt hours these customers are consuming, and then purchasing incremental RECs above and beyond what the plan, the static plan would have been to cover their incremental usage. And since we're already buying RECs, we have a process to do that. I don't see this as being overly burdensome. I guess from my perspective, it seems to me the decision is, to be more responsive to customers and offer another option, which is sort of a good thing. The bad thing would be to distract us a little bit. It's going to take a little bit of time, to get this on the bill. Another thing with NISC. And we are already heading toward 100% and plan to close the gap in the next, 9 years. Do we want to add that complexity to the right plan? I don't know yet whether it would be a new rate or a rate rider in terms of administratively, but it would be something new that we would need to maintain. And so again, it's your balance of complexity versus responsiveness and variety and offering people an option and getting the town, as Dan said, to its goal quicker through the voluntary, contributions of town people. So that to me seems to be what needs to be considered.
So you would basically act as a broker for the purchase of RECs for individuals who are interested in buying 100% renewable power now. Is that right?
No, I think the way I envision it and the way Middleborough does it is CMLP would be the purchaser, it would take title to those RECs. And only the participants who voluntarily opted into this program would be paying the cost of those. So that incremental purchase would not be spread to the other non-participating members. So we get to buy more RECs, but only the people who are participating and paying a premium on their bills would pay for it.
And is there a foreseeable number of either individuals interested in purchasing these RECs that would be required before it becomes cost effective for you to spend time on building this program? Do you need to know that the 150 people or 1,000 people or 3 people are interested in something like this to make it worthwhile?
I need to get with Carol about what the administrative costs on our software side would be, if any. I don't anticipate it would be a huge burden on my time to manage it. So I don't know the answer to your question, but one thing that could be done is if we do an upcoming customer survey, we could certainly put that as a question on the survey to try to gauge the interest, so we would get some idea of the magnitude of the population that would be interested.
Okay, thank you. Ryan, and then Gordon.
So,
yeah. About half an hour behind schedule, I'm just saying.
Well, Alice, you just used
I'm just offering for all of those who are sitting waiting to speak that we are behind schedule and we won't be able to finish in 10 minutes.
I'll have
this is not a reflection of you or your comments, by the way. It was just a statement of fact so that Wendy was able to finish the meeting last time early, and I am incapable of doing that. So, yeah, your comments.
So this is, as long as this program is additive to the existing efforts, it's a good idea. I am concerned about staff time. If individuals are interested in offsetting the other 50% for the next 9 years that are going forward, there are programs out there like the Green Energy Consumers Alliance to buy that. So my question is, would it be easier on the administration of this program to, on the website, refer people to that existing program done by a third party? Or would it make more sense to make it easier on the customer, but take staff time to administrate this program?
Good question.
That's to Laura.
It would certainly be easier on the light plant if, you know, we didn't act, as Alice said, sort of as a broker for this. But I think far fewer people would probably participate if they needed to do the machinations, you know, themselves. And so, you know, again, it's a judgment call, I think, about the value it provides versus, you know, I don't view the cost as being huge, but it's death by 1,000 cuts sometimes. Every little thing we add, you know, does add up eventually. And we are working on a number of big projects such as AMI this year, and we got to work on the battery. So, you know, we have things to do. And again, this is a small thing, but
I would prefer time is spent on those projects that are already in the pipeline and something that is for the next 9 years, a stopgap effort. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Stephen, and then Gordon.
Yeah, and unfortunately I have to leave in a minute, so I want to, before I dropped out, I want to say thank you, and then I do have to go over another meeting. But I think that this issue, which I do think there's probably desire or interest in the community to have this kind of option. But Brian, as you mentioned, the true, you know, renewable sources that we really want are more expensive. And I think this kind of reminds me of the meter discussion, where if you're going to have a meter that requires, you know, more labor, more effort, there should be a premium associated with that. And so while I definitely support the idea that we should have this option for consumers, I do think it's reasonable to attach a premium to it, because there is a higher cost, both from a, you know, staff time standpoint, but also a, you know, I say materials, a source standpoint as well. So I guess I would just throw that out for consideration and then bail on y'all. So have a good day.
Thank you, Stephen. I think Gordon had his hand up.
Thanks. I just say that when you submit your Massachusetts taxes, you have the opportunity to volunteer to pay a higher tax rate. And of course, nobody ever checks that off. And people who are skeptical of tax revenue generation and big government and all of that can point to the fact that nobody ever signs up for that to justify not raising taxes, right? Nobody wants higher taxes. There's kind of a risk anyway to putting this out there and having nobody sign up for it, and then skeptics say, see. So I'm actually in a way more comfortable with directing people to use this external site. It doesn't affect our costs, burden us, and actually they can use that external site to buy more and cover maybe, say, other uses that aren't that, like their gasoline consumption or something like that. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Great, thank you. All right, I think I see no more discussion from the board. I don't know that we need to make a decision about this. I think it was an interesting proposal for us to think about. Do we agree that we do not need to make a decision today on whether we want to create a new program?
Yeah, we don't.
Well,
we don't.
The citizens, you know, have requested it. So we're bringing it forward for you to consider. You can choose to say, we're not ready to make a decision on this yet, and we're going to defer it. You know, I think the citizens would be thrilled if you said today, yes, let's absolutely do it. But, you know, that's your prerogative to consider it when you feel that you have enough information and it's, you know, you're ready.
So personally, I think we would need to understand the transactional costs of the two alternatives that are on the table. What does it take for us to create a program at CMLP? When does it become cost effective and additive to our total supply that it makes a difference? Or whether we have a full understanding of the opportunities for citizens to purchase it on their own through one of these websites. Was it the Green Consumer Alliance? Is that what you said, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah. And whether that's an opportunity that would have equal value. So I think before we can, I would suggest that before we vote on whether to create the new program, that we at least do the little bit of analysis to understand what the two options are that are on the table, to see which one we want to spend our time doing. Does that sound reasonable to others on the board? I see a bunch of thumbs up and nods. Okay, great. So we all have a little bit of homework to think about. We're taking up the town meeting warrant articles, and I hopefully, there are two articles for us to consider taking positions on. One is regarding broadband, and the other is on all electric construction. Let's begin with a broadband article because there's a citizen, this is a citizen petition, and this petitioner is here. I know she's had some time constraints this morning with the first day of school for her child. So Gail, if you'd like to present your article to the board, and then the board will deliberate and then hopefully take a position.
Thank you. Can you all see me, or are we just listening at this point?
Is yours, if you have your video on, we should be able to see you. We can definitely hear you.
We can hear you, we can't see you.
Okay, well, it's not important. I wasn't going to present. And actually, it's not his first day back to school. It's bike to school day.
Oh, bike to school.
So it was a little more difficult than getting on the bus, which thankfully he's been able to do since September. So it's bike to school day in Concord. Thank you for letting me speak. So basically, I mean, I think, you know, I think most of you all know a bit about the article. I'm just going to hit some of the major points. The article would urge the town manager to complete the fiber network. To assist in that effort, a short-term study committee would be appointed. And the committee's charge will be threefold. First, it will study expediting service on the last 5% of streets that don't have fiber laid in them. It would explore barriers to subscription growth, and it would investigate opportunities for expanding fiber to the home and fiber to the business. And by that, I mean, getting the fiber, from the street into the home or into the business. And I think that's commonly understood as the last mile. So why a committee? I think, well, fiber is a public resource. It's very profitable. It's growing. I, for one, aim to spend more on broadband than on electricity. I think that there are different ways that the goals can be set for a municipal fiber network. The staff can decide, the light board can decide, and citizens can decide. So my view is that a group of citizens can work more quickly with a broader base of support. The light board has a lot of important issues to consider, as this meeting demonstrates. There's just so much going on in the field of power and power supply. It's really important to understand that this committee would be temporary. It would work for about 8 months and then come up with some recommendations, and then let town meeting decide about next steps. And these could be, financial, these could be, structural. I don't want to speculate, but I think that now is an important time to do these things because there are a lot of opportunities, funding. The Biden administration has a lot of infrastructure opportunities. There's COVID relief that can be utilized and things that are available right now that I believe are not being taken advantage of. So I'm hopeful that a committee can act a bit more quickly. So that's it in a nutshell. And if anyone has comments, I'd love to hear those or questions.
Dave, do you have any thoughts or comments to add to?
No, I understand what the article's all about.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Brian.
So Gail, I think this is generally a good initiative, but your article had some deadlines for the committee. It also, you had appointments by the town manager. Would it be better to appoint the committee from the select board? That's one of my thoughts. And is this something, because it will take staff time to work with the committee to provide the data and the analysis. And we do want to ramp up installations. Is this something the heart of your report here is to, or your committee is to generate a report on where we are with broadband and where the barriers are. Is that a correct assessment?
Yes. To answer your first question, I have been speaking with a lot of folks about the proposed warrant article, and I am considering making a change to adjust the motion and have the select board appoint. I think the wording would still be the same, to urge the town manager, because that's his administrative role, and the citizens give their input in that way. But I think it might make sense for the select board to be the appointing authority. And secondly, you asked about the goal of the report would be to
the committee
of the committee, thank you, to make recommendations, and I can't remember now exactly what your question was, but yeah, I think the answer is yes. And I just think there are so many little things. I mean, I've heard a lot about, multi-dwelling units have different challenges, and I just think it's a great opportunity for citizens to really, we can do a survey, and find out, how many people have this issue and come up with some possible solutions. And I just really feel like a study committee is better suited to look at these things, more quickly and come up with creative ideas. The business community may have some ideas. So I hope that answered your question, Brian.
Okay. Yeah.
Other questions from board members? There are two hands raised in the participants, Mark Howell and Pamela Drint. Let's start with Mark. He's top on my list here. The only reason I said that. Yep.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Great. It's nice to see you all. Good morning. The fiber optic and telecommunications services are really an extraordinarily valuable asset to the town. And it's really capable of supporting economic vitality, supporting sustainability and resilience goals. And I'm struck by how far we've come since this was started about 7 years ago, when we were really legitimately conservative about the goals. We needed to ensure that taxpayers and ratepayers were not harmed. We needed to learn how to operate in a completely new industry. And we needed to confirm that we could be competitive and really earn a return. And I was struck last night, like many of you, I sat up for the enterprise budget hearing, by the fact that, how many lessons we've learned. The concerns that the business might not be successful have largely been alleviated at this point. And in fact, we saw that telecommunications is capable of providing material support to CMLP, and through the whole PILOF discussion, and I don't know how much of that came before the board, but the idea that a payment in lieu of franchises could support PEG access through the department. So we're really in a very different place. Telecommunications even helped CMLP avoid an operating loss last year. And so at this point, I believe the dialogue has really shifted to the options and capabilities that such a system can provide. And it's really time to revisit those strategic objectives and examine the community policy objectives that telecom affords us with. So, why do we need a study? We need a study because the issue of investment priority really needs to be discussed by a group that is focused on investment priorities. And, I'm struck again, and, I've been to many, many of these board meetings. You guys spend a lot of time. It's, going on 2 hours since this meeting started. And the electric utility legitimately has consumed virtually all of that time. So what we're really doing is suggesting that there's expertise in the community that could help, and that the citizens should be consulted on whether or not, what we really are trying to accomplish and how to prioritize things like providing inclusive access. I was struck again last night by the whole discussion of the Beatty Center, by the, the over 80 passes that they used to hand out. And that was definitely in response to the idea that senior citizens need health services and support, and our community decided to do that. When we talk about the 5% of streets that are not covered, that actually represents probably more like 20 or 25% of the population. When we, if we use our vehicle registrations, and we ought to ask ourselves, what is that population? Is that potentially the more economically disadvantaged population in Concord? And what should we be doing proactively with these resources that we have to do that? So I would say that a group like this could explore options like pursuing grants and other low-income programs for, as through the FCC. Looking specifically at what the options are for multi-dwelling units and private roads, which may not have been able to be done. Setting targets for supporting underground. We struggle to put enough money in the underground fund, but we have actually yet to ask telecommunications to contribute to the underground fund. Maybe we should be. Dave mentioned last night that we're doing 2 Barkus Farm Road and Wright Farm Road, and telecommunications is going to get conduit for that. As a result of those projects, maybe that's a source of funds that could be considered. So these kinds of policy recommendations and choices are something that, the citizenry who are, after all, the owners of this really should be doing it. And then the other question is, we've heard multiple times that staff is busy, COVID has happened, there's a big backlog. We know resources are tight. There's expertise in the community that I consulted before we ever started this service that helped me set directions and think and be thoughtful about it. And I'm suggesting that this is a time when those experts around the community and those voices could be asked again with little or no impact, because after all, we're talking about recommendations and urges. We're not really talking about something that should necessarily consume a lot of staff time. Also, we have a new telecom staff, and that staff might actually benefit from being informed by the history that's available throughout the community. So, with the possibility of COVID recovery funds, with the possibility of infrastructure legislation, it's good to be ready. And I think that the financial and technical maturity of the telecom services such that it is a really good time to look at what those next phases are going to be. That infrastructure that's running telecom is not getting any newer. It's 8 to 10 years old at this stage of the game. And so some real, deeper thinking on the investment priorities. I was impressed. I stayed up and didn't fall asleep before Alan went. And, Alan's got a plan that goes out to 2032 or beyond for the water system, because he recognizes that water mains are a 75 to 100-year investment. Fiber optic is at least a 30-year kind of thing, and we don't have a plan that looks forward more than one at this point. So I would strongly urge the Light Board to consider supporting this article. I think it could be very helpful. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mark. There are a number of hands up. I think I said Pamela Dritt would be next, then we'll go to Carlin and then Scott.
Thank you, Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4. I also support strongly that we support this for the reasons Mark just said. Also, there's very important issues of what services get provided, like hard connections of the smart meters in order to allow people who have fears for the EMF radiation or whatever it is harming them to still participate in time of use rates. It's very important. And as well as customer support for programs that would allow people to disconnect from Comcast and the other providers of communication services that would also protect us from throttling and other things that people do. And I think that shouldn't be put on your shoulders. This would help.
Okay, thank you. Carlin Reed.
Okay, hi, it's Carlin Reed, 83 Woods End, but I'm speaking in the capacity as the chair of the PEG Access Advisory Committee. Our committee at our May 6th meeting voted unanimously to support Article 41, and I'm in the process of preparing a one-page statement for inclusion in the town meeting handbook to that effect. As David Wood had mentioned today, this is an essential service, and this Article 41 would provide a targeted effort to look at some issues that desperately do need to be examined. I believe Wright Farm Road, the property that has the conduit that's going to be placed in, is one of those locations that historically had not had access to broadband service. The conduit provides that approach, and that is the kind of issue that this targeted study could examine. So I encourage you to support Article 41. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott.
Thank you.
You're muted, Scott.
How's that? Can you hear me now? Scott Hopkinson, 67 Indian Spring Road, Concord, Mass. I'm speaking as an individual, but I am also a member of the PEG Access Committee that Carlin currently leads. I was the chair briefly. I also have the history of having written the Concord Broadband Business Plan in 2015, which included a financial model that carried us through December 2022. Again, I'm speaking as a citizen. A couple of quick comments. First of all, I'm speaking in favor of Article 41. I think there's a number of things that we can do as to support the broadband as it has grown up. It's moved from, I think Mark quite elegantly spoke to the fact that in the early days we considered some real risks and mitigations around how to build the broadband to the point that it's gotten to now. There were some pretty, we actually studied a number of examples of towns that attempted to do this and failed miserably. And a great credit to the light plant and to the team to make the progress. I think it's just now we believe that it's time to go to the next step, and that's what we're here to support. One last comment. I'm happy to hear about the discussion of the payment in lieu for PEG, because the PEG committee specifically has been worried about loss of revenue as Comcast might move to fixed-based wireless and allow them to sidestep the broadband fees. I think that's enough for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, I think we have heard all the comments that people have wanted to make from the attending the meeting. Are we ready for a vote of the board to take a position on this? Pam?
No, I just, I mean, I might have to abstain. I mean, I just wanted to say that I completely respect and support the idea of digging into this issue. I absolutely do. I have maybe a more 30,000 foot just question about basically governance. It raises for me a question of wherein lies the fundamental responsibility to do this digging. And you know, I'm very much in favor of citizens committees. I've participated in many. I think that it's an important part of the town's fabric. I'm just raising the question, where does this work belong? I mean, and I'm also, I will confess, a strong believer in government doing government's work. So, so I just raised the question. The only hesitation I have, it's not on the merits of getting this done. It's not on that this is an important priority, not at all. It's more this fundamental question of wherein lies the responsibility? And if the responsibility lies as an inherently governmental thing, we should be devoting the resources to delivering that. And that's sort of a fundamental premise that I always operate from. So the only question I really have, and I don't think I can answer it, and it may be the reason I can't vote, is, you know, who should be doing this? And that's the end of my.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Gordon.
Pam, in a way, the simplest answer to your question is it's us, board. We have the regulatory or oversight or whatever, the authority right now to steer the telecom service and speak for the ratepayers and so forth. But we have a section in society, in our community, that want us to move faster. And we haven't been moving faster. And you know what? That's okay. That's a decision that we made. This was coming from the treasurer of Concord, the light plant director, David, thank you. The good people that that we've had working in staff and in implementing this in a deliberate way. And we were able to achieve profitability, and even recently did a transfer of capital back to the light plant that had been. So anyway, it's okay if outside of that loop of that process of steady progress that another part of town comes in and takes a look and says, do we need to re-examine assumptions? So it's okay.
And Brian, thank you.
There was a comment made that the fiber doesn't cover 5% of the town in the article, but that it may cover a larger population than 5% of the population. Is that due to multifamily housing not really being covered? Dave, do you mind clarifying?
Yeah, basically the 5%, there's a number of roads in town that are underground that don't have conduits for fiber because they were put in underground back in the 80s and early 90s. So that's the area that we can't serve currently. You know, there are some multi-dwelling units that we do not have conduits in as well. So the 5% that we referred to in the past has always been 5% of the roads in town we don't have conduit on. So it could be more than 5% of the population potentially, but it's the only measuring stick that we have right now.
All right, and was the barrier the homeowners association on those, or was it just the road? The road wasn't built right for this particular issue.
So it's a combination of things. You know, some of which was during construction. You know, broadband wasn't even a thought at the time. So that's one piece. Another piece, you know, when we go in and we do conduit in subdivisions, you know, or in multi-dwelling units, and we add the extra conduit in the handholds or fiber, then the next question comes in, is the customer gonna trench from their property to our connection point? Costs associated with that. So that's another barrier. But, you know, when we looked at this, when we were looked at doing the smart grid, you know, years ago, we did two different business models to look at the last mile, so to speak. And the dollar value at the time was 10 million. And then the second time we did it was 12 million. So it's a big number. And so really those are the barriers to the last 5% that we have in front of us.
I think it would be of value to have a study like this done for the board, for this board, as well as for the community. Gail, this is a question for you. The way the article is currently written, I agree with the big picture point, but have you learned going through this town meeting process quite a lot of the other questions and things that may come up in details about how to reposition this article? Would you consider doing this at next year's town meeting in a fashion based on what you've learned this year? Like is it worth waiting a year to get the article right versus you know, going forward with what it is today?
So I think the article is broad enough to cover everything that I've heard. I mean, I've learned a lot, but that's why I wanted to create this study committee. And I think timing is really important. I mean, internet is so much more important than it was 18 months ago. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, and again, it's the point of the study committee is to make a report with recommendations, and maybe they'll recommend doing more study. You know, I don't know, but I just think that, yeah, I haven't considered delaying it. Okay. And I did want to respond to Pam's point about governance, and Gordon mentioned it too. So that this is the citizens make the laws in Concord. Town meeting is the legislative body, and so and this group, this committee, would be subject to the open meeting law. You know, anyone can come. You know, it's not like some private group. So I think, you know, the citizens should be allowed to weigh in this manner. So I just wanted to respond to that.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Wendy?
Yeah, I'll be quick. I just wanted to reiterate, I support Pam's concern over governance, but I also think for the board, and maybe this is a question to Dave, at a future meeting, we have new staff in leadership positions in broadband, and the board probably needs a little more education on our strategy and where the team is and the staff is, and trying to develop that longer term strategy. So just to the point of, I'm sure we're thinking about it, we're just not ready, but we should get educated.
Yep, that's and we're in agreement with that, and it's part of the upcoming plan.
Great. So I do see two more participant hands up. Let's take two more comments, and then we'll try to vote on this article. Mark Howell, and followed by David Allen, unless those were old hands.
No, I was actually going to help respond to Pam's concern as well around governance. I actually like the Energy Futures Task Force as a kind of a model for what this was about. When we were trying to address some of the challenging issues that were coming up about how to define sustainability goals, I think in the end it was quite helpful for town meeting to require that the Energy Futures Task Force actually bring together the school department, the light plant, the broader concerns around the community to really figure out how to apply that to goals which are now guiding the whole of government, which is one of the reasons why I'm supportive of the suggestion that the select board should really take on that option. And without getting too fine about it, we do know that the town manager is the general manager of the light board, of the light plant rather, and the light board is appointed by the town manager. And so by actually moving this particular thing, which is about futures, it's about strategy, it's about policy, it's about what the broader objectives are that the community wants to see. Back to the purview of the select board, it's really saying this is a good time to stick up the periscope and figure out, what's really out there and what people are wanting, while we're making these implicit choices about how to spend these return on investment. PEG is a great choice, but how do you weigh PEG against access to school children or enhancing the broadband availability for the businesses? And the second short point I'll make with respect to, so for example, Concord Green, which we hear a lot about, is in an area of town which, if you look at the roadmap, it says that road is served, but those hundreds of units in Concord Green are not served. And that's because of these challenges about how do you get into the multi-dwelling units. The business areas of town, the downtown areas, are quite challenging to get into. And the question really comes down to, should we spend the money for that economic vitality? We've spent a lot of town meeting time on things like, what kind of businesses do we want? Well, I can tell you, I've been working with on the Cape with Falmouth and some other communities about how important it is for their small businesses to be able to process credit cards through their local broadband service when Comcast is not serving them well. And those are choices that we can make in terms of economic vitality, but those issues need to be surfaced. And so Gail has, I think, very wisely asked for real estate representation, business community representation. She's really asking us to consider really opening up that dialogue to those voices and making sure that people who don't show up at 7:30 on a Wednesday morning get a chance to get invited to give their perspectives before we make these choices. So thank you very much. And again, I urge you to consider supporting this.
Thank you. And I think we have one more comment from David Allen.
Just to amplify on this question of the government taking responsibility for getting this done, amplify Gail's and now Mark's. In a democracy, the government is the people. And in Concord, for goodness sake, we have a very direct democracy. Yes, there's a division of labor amongst various elements. Let me simply put in my own 2 cents and appreciate Mark's eloquent description of this early on. It's time for us to go there. We need to do this, and I certainly look forward to the board supporting this. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have a question. By the way, I just agree with everybody on everything, and I very much appreciate the dialogue. I think it's a very profound question, and I think sometimes government delegates, sometimes government relies on really very important grassroots efforts and delegates to committees. So I'm very much in favor of much of everything that's been said, and I just want to be grateful for the conversation. Alice, can we defer the vote until we have more information? I would like more information on what is planned by the light board. Maybe picking up on Wendy's point a little bit. That might inform my vote right now. I'd like us to have a little more time to just learn a little bit more about what the plan is to get this data and what priority this has for going forward.
When you say this, are you talking about the committee, or are you talking about the light plan strategy for broadband? I know what you're asking for. There's
What is the light board going to do, and how does it dovetail with what this committee wants to do?
You have a response?
And we don't need to deal with it now. I just want to be able to think about it if we can defer the vote until we get a little more data. If we're having another meeting, I don't know.
We are scheduled to have a meeting on June 9th, and town meeting is June 13th. Are there thoughts on the board of whether you want to defer a vote until June 9th to get more information? Or do you feel like you have enough information to move forward with a decision on whether to support Article 41?
I feel I have enough information, because the question is, should the town form a committee to do the assessment? I don't think we need to do the assessment. We need a committee to do the assessment.
Thank you. Gordon, you're shaking your head. You're ready to...
Yeah, it's funny. Institutionally, I feel like, I don't know, like a little embarrassed in a sense that a part of our community is asking us to do more, do better, whatever, than we have been. So there's sort of like oh no, we don't need that. We're doing a great job. That's my kind of initial reaction. I wouldn't be surprised if others do, maybe staff does. Hey, we're doing great here. We don't need to be pushed. But I'm willing to say, yeah, okay, look, maybe it's holding up a mirror to how we're doing. And I think that our decisions have been pretty solid. So actually with a good exchange of views, I think we'll be able to defend the way that we've made our decision, maybe change some too. So I'm for it. These things can sometimes be a little uncomfortable, but I think we'll learn more through this process.
Okay, Wendy, any other thoughts?
I was going to support Pam's perspective, because I feel like at town meeting, the board or somebody from our entities has to speak to this to respond to the committee request, and that's where I have some interest. So, I would prefer to defer to hear a little more from Dave in terms of where we're at and his concerns over how we would participate in the committee. I think all I see in the committee is that there's a representative, but
so Dave, I'm hearing that at least 2 members of the board would like to hear a little bit more from you in the next couple of weeks. Is it possible for you to provide us any materials to consider that would help inform a decision on this particular warrant article? that would help, the board make a decision on the 9th. Is that something that you have the time and capacity to put together, or maybe the new telecom director can do that?
Yeah, we can get some information to you guys for the next meeting on this particular topic.
Okay. So it sounds like maybe what we should do is defer the vote until the 9th and vote on whether to support the article at town meeting for the 13th. And with that, Dave will provide a little bit of background about where we are in the development of a telecom strategy and to see what are the holes that might be filled by the committee. Yeah, Brian.
If we're going to defer, Gail, if you have planned changes to the motion or a handout, getting that to us before this next meeting, which is right before town meeting, would be helpful. That way we can talk not about what was printed in the warrant, but what you actually hope to have passed.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. The motions are due next Friday, and then the printed write-up for the meeting, I think they're calling it meeting materials, is due, I think, the 27th of May. So I can definitely forward that.
Great, thank you.
The board.
That would be great. Okay, I think that conversation, we're now tabling the vote on this article until it's June 9th. The next item on the agenda is the other warrant article, hopefully that the board will be able to take a position on, and that is Article 31, Article 31, whatever the number. I see, was that 31, Brian?
Yeah, it's Article 31.
Thank you.
And this is something the board knows quite a lot about, so this could go rather quickly. I think we should do a little straw poll to see if we can speed up rather than rehashing the discussion, unless people need it.
So let me just say what the article is. The article is a single vote at town meeting that would require new construction in Concord to be all electric. And at the same time, that one vote is also would request home rule by the state legislature for us to implement the new bylaw. So it's a creation of a bylaw that requires new construction to be all electric and the authority to implement it. That's basically what it is. Did some checking. We average about 25 tear down new constructions every year. So it affects 25 properties in Concord, about, give or take.
And the only other piece of information I learned that I think we should share is the bylaw affects only new construction, but the home rule petition requests for new construction and major renovations. But we have no bylaw for major renovations yet. And if we were to create one, it'd have to go to town meeting.
Correct. And that was on the advice of town council to add the language for renovations.
It saves a lot of time and effort.
Right. Do we need further discussion, or is the board ready to vote?
I'm ready to vote, but I want to make sure others are ready. And then if so, I'll make a motion.
Okay. Is there a discussion? Wendy.
Yeah, so can we just speak again to the housing authority being exempted? And I know they want flexibility, but I think there is a risk that there's some concern about electric being not cost effective. And so I just think that's important.
So I'm sorry, is that
it's more so as part of the proposal, there's an exemption for the housing.
Affordable housing, yeah.
Affordable housing, I'm sorry. And I just, that's my only concern with this article. I really want to support it. I just think that the article ought to, I just don't think there should be an exemption. That's my own opinion.
And that's been a topic of conversation. And the question would be whether there's an amendment from the floor of town meeting to remove the exemption for affordable housing. If that were to come forward, personally, I would support that. But it is the voice of people and is the act of the legislature, our town legislature, to make that decision. The reason that there's an exemption at all for affordable housing is that it was requested by both the select board and the affordable housing community. And given that support of the overall article was important, the decision was made to compromise on what we might think. We believe that it's less expensive or at no more expensive to build an all-electric home and to operate an all-electric home, give or take, some percentage of, flexibility in the market. But the request was pretty strong, and we felt it was important to meet the needs of the select board and the housing authority.
The only other comment that I would say is that someone spoke, and I did not get the man's name, that spoke very eloquently in terms of electric and making sure that we were confident it was cost effective. So there were some concerns there that might come up at town meeting. That's all.
Yep. Gordon, and then Pam.
I believe that electric is cost effective. I also believe that in answering the concerns of the affordable housing community, that the light plant actually has programs that would help to pay, help people with lower incomes pay their electric bill. And by including their heat in that, we're actually giving them support for not only their electricity, but also their heating. I think that's a really great point that you raised, Wendy. And it'd be nice that if we could capture what you've said here in any communication that we give to town meeting, that we not only support that, but I think we can do better.
Good point. Thank you. Pam.
I just basically, I think what Gordon and Wendy said, I wanted to just strongly support that. I am sort of like this aphorism, enemy of the, don't let the enemy of the good, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. But I personally think it's very unfortunate that this is an exemption at all. I think it's embarrassing that it is. I wish it weren't there. I think it has short-term, I think you can maybe argue for it in the short term. It makes no sense in the long term, and it makes no sense to me in terms of good public policy on addressing major climate issues and social justice issues. Having said that, if it were possible to, and I will support it if the exemption is there, remains, but reluctantly, is it possible for us to make some kind of statement along the lines that was suggested that we would prefer that there not be the exemption? I don't know.
You can make a motion from the floor of town meeting to amend the article as written to remove the exemption for affordable housing. Any other recommendation wouldn't hold any value. It can go in our minutes as a discussion, but what's before us is the written bylaw and the request for home rule. And
so you're saying it's thumbs up or thumbs down. We can't say, we're in support of this and make a comment. We can't do that.
Well, sure you can make it. You just did.
No, I'm saying where is our statement going to be expressed? At town meeting, or
that's for you to decide.
I see. Okay. I got it.
So at town meeting, and in the booklet it says the Article 31 is supported by the Select Board, the Climate Action Advisory Board, and it would list the committees who have voiced support for the article.
Okay.
And it doesn't remove your ability to request.
My question was more whether we could embed in our support some kind of something with respect to this exemption. That's all.
Yeah, if you can help me figure out how. Yeah.
What is the publishing deadline for committee comments like that? If you can say the light plant is in favor and then have some blurb printed for what the committee's position is. There's got to be a deadline, and I think our next meeting will be way too late.
I don't know that. I think that I heard someone else say a committee was writing a letter, maybe the PEG Access was writing a letter that would be included in the town meeting book that will be distributed. I don't know the process, but we'll have to find out. I thought we have one page that we were permitted, but it sounds like maybe there's more. And maybe that's a place for the board to write its opinion about the article.
Also, I would say, having said what I do is my view on this exemption. I also don't want to, disrupt here, Alice. And I think it's important for us to, take guidance from those of us who worked on it a lot to, if there's a thought that this is going to really upset the apple cart, to do anything other than support this article on its face. I don't want to be a disruptor in that regard. I just also am happy and mindful of the comments that came from other members of the board on this issue and wanted to support that.
Yeah, I'm supportive of supporting the article the way it is, because I do know moving an article from the process of drafting to getting on the warrant, that there's lots of compromises with many different stakeholders in town. So, I mean, we can, as a board, decide to share that position, Pam, but I would rather understand that, not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and go forward.
So do we have a motion on whether we support the article as written?
I'll make the motion for as written. And if Pam, can I ask Pam? Pam, would you like me to modify that to make the vote on the inclusion of an exemption?
I'm hesitating only because I really don't want to screw this one up,
Right.
and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that. I wanted very much to articulate my view that exemption is really problematic. I was very encouraged to hear other statements from the board. I wish there were a way for us to capture that, but I do not want to do that at the expense of the article. And I have heard enough to know that there is, some risk here if we pull this thread, and I don't want to, undo the whole sweater. I really don't.
All right, so I'll make the motion. Go ahead.
Brian, I share Pam's sentiment, so I wouldn't mind supporting both the article as written, but should there also be a vote at town meeting to remove that affordability, we would still support that.
Yeah, there you go. I'm there.
Right. So we would support both.
So at town meeting, if there were a motion to remove the exemption for affordable housing, if this board would caucus at town meeting, we could take a board vote, or as individual citizens, you could vote to support the amendment. So we should decide, we can decide on the 9th if that were to come as an amendment to the article. How would this board like to move forward, as a board decision or as individuals deciding on the amendment?
Yeah, and that's where I was going to, Alice. So, at town meeting, we'll have posted a light board meeting so that you guys can caucus on any amendments that come up and modify your position as a board if you need to.
So I would be in support of voting in support of this as written, but I think our minutes should reflect that several board members would also would be willing to support the housing authority being removed as an exemption.
So you're asking that the minutes reflect that?
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
So I agree with Pam. I don't want to disrupt this. I want it to go through.
So you ready for a motion?
Yeah.
I am. Others?
Oh yeah, really.
Okay.
I move that the light board vote to support Article 31 at town meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
I second.
Okay. All right. We'll do a roll call vote. Brian?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
Wendy? I think that was yes?
Yes.
Okay. And Alice, yes. Okay. Thank you. We have a vote of the board. It is now, oh my gosh. Wendy, you're going to have to be the chair. It is 9:50. I know there are additional items on the agenda.
We can defer those updates to the next meeting because they're not heavy updates right now, but we did want to keep the board informed on where we are. So I would just recommend that we move those because we do have some employees that have 10 o'clock meetings.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Well, public comments.
Yeah.
Oh, Do I have any additional public comments? I do not see any. Oh, Pamela Drew.
Thank you for your vote. Can you please vote that if the amendment thing was removed, the exemption for public housing, that you would support it? Because if you don't, I think there's a massive misunderstanding of the cost of all electric building techniques now. And anytime we support making an exemption, we are supporting the misinformation that it's less costly, we're supporting people's delusions that this is too expensive, and it isn't. And we create second-class citizens for people in need of support, and that is absurd. The time for coddling to make people feel good about it is gone. We got to do this. Please vote for it. Don't just. The affordable housing groups don't know that it's cost effective to do this. Otherwise, they wouldn't have asked for the exemption. This is embarrassing, like Pamela and Wendy said. Please go ahead and vote for it. You could do it really quickly.
I think you're asking for a process that we are unable to take a vote on. You're asking us to take a position on something that may or may not occur. So I think the board—
you can do that. You can have already, it doesn't matter.
I'm just suggesting, Pamela, I understand what your request is. I feel uncomfortable requesting that this board take a position on something that may not occur at town meeting, when we have a meeting that's posted at town meeting where we could caucus and make a decision as a board if we want to. And as individuals, we can also vote.
Can I suggest that we at least say that we are definitely going to put this on the agenda for the 9th? To just review where the town is on it, and just to, you know.
Tell me put what on the board so we know what to put on the agenda.
Just an update on the status of the article, and especially with respect to that exemption.
Tell me what you expect to be an update by June 9th, because everything will be printed as written. I'm just curious. We don't know if there will be an amendment from the floor.
Don't people have to put amendments in advance if they want to do it?
They don't have, I don't know. And they don't have to tell us.
Okay, I would just say I'd like an update. I'd like an update and okay. on the status of 31 and with respect to the exemption. And we give us a little breathing room to think about a little bit more and see where the town is and whether there has been an amendment offered.
It's fine to put it on the agenda.
It's an update. It could take a minute. I just think a placeholder there might be of some utility at this point.
Okay, fine, can be on the agenda.
I move that we take a vote to adjourn. Seeing no hands up, just in
I second. I
second.
All right, all in favor? Brian?
Aye.
Morgan?
Yes.
Pam?
Yep.
Wendy?
Yes.
Alice, yes. The meeting's adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.